Welcome to Greater Good Radio Hawaii, where leaders inspire leaders. Greater Good Radio Hawaii is dedicated to social entrepreneurship. I'm your host, Evan Leong, and with me is my co-host, Carrie Leong.
Mahalo, Evan. Today's guest is Dr. HANK WUH, founder and CEO of CBI, Cellular Bioengineering, Inc. Dr. WUH is an inventor with 5 issued and numerous pending patents. He has an undergraduate and medical degree from Johns Hopkins University and a master's from Harvard University. Dr. WUH recently won the 2005 R&D 100 Award for the development of the neural matrix chip. Please welcome to Greater Good Radio, Dr. HANK WUH. Welcome to our show, Doc.
Oh, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Can you tell us a little bit about CBI and what they do?
CBI is a technology company based here in Hawaii, and our focus is really to become a leader in the area of what we call regenerative medicine. That is the engineering and the creation of tissues to replace those tissues that are aging or diseased or injured, basically.
Is that like cloning, or is that different?
No, it's very different from cloning. Our expertise is really cell biology, tissue culture, as well as material science. So one of the lead projects we're working on, for example, is the ability to create human corneas in a laboratory to serve the 10 million or so people around the world who are blind, and most of these people would probably never have a chance to see ever again in the absence of a donated cornea for transplantation.
How did that whole thing come about? What's the story behind that?
I was on an airplane ride, actually, between Tokyo and Honolulu one day, and I sat next to a physician who's an ophthalmologist who actually taught me something very interesting, that because of mostly cultural reasons in Asia, most people, they don't like to donate organs for transplantation, whether it's the cornea or kidneys and so forth.
Like superstition?
It's really a whole host of different cultural reasons. But basically, to make a long story short, as a result, there are many people in Japan and China and most parts of Asia who are blind from corneal disease, and the only way you can restore their vision is with a corneal transplant. But there's simply not enough tissues around. So it's actually a huge global problem affecting tens of millions of people.
Were you aware of this before you started, or did you just find, oh, that's the need, and you just went for it?
Well, as a surgeon, I actually have been involved in different types of transplants in the past, but I personally was not really aware of the fact that there's such a huge shortage of tissues for transplantation. So it as an inventor, it caught my curiosity. So I actually spent about a year working with a lot of different scientists around the country to try to find a technology solution that could potentially address the problem.
So did you self-fund that then for a year?
It was self-funded actually for the first year and a half of the operation. Just I went to Japan. I talked to the Koseisho. We met with the Japanese FDA and the iBanking folks, and basically really trying to understand what is the scope of the problem, really on a global scale, and then very systematically look at major research institutions and top scientific talents who are working on technologies that could potentially address the problem.
So you guys actually have done it, right? You've regenerated, I think you said something like 1,000 corneas from one actual cornea. We can
reproducibly in the laboratory basically grow and magnify and replicate the cells from the cornea, the corneal endothelial cells, so that we can create these cells, bioengineer these cells to be used in transplantation. And the laboratory work has been very successful to date.
Do you have to go through clinical testing for that too, or how does that work?
Yes, we do. In fact, we're in conversation with the FDA right now in terms of trying to figure out the process and the protocol and so forth.
So dollar size, this market is potentially how large, do you think?
Well, it's an interesting question, and there are several sort of components to that answer. I think, just give you an example, in Japan, right? Japan is half of our population, so basically Japan should be doing about maybe 25,000 cornea transplants a year. United States, we do about 45 to 50,000 cornea transplants a year, restoring vision to these people. But last year, Japan actually had only 1,000 donors, basically. So there's a gross shortage, every year. And if you look at the backlog list, there's probably a couple of 100,000 people in Japan alone, probably more than 1 million in China, probably several million, throughout Asia, people who could actually benefit from a transplant, but who otherwise can't have it because there's just no supply of tissues. So actually, on a global scale, it's a multi-billion-dollar market that's basically unaddressed.
Do you guys have competition in this area, or are you pretty much the only player?
No, I think with every important problem and with every great idea, there will always be competition because the world's filled with smart, intelligent, motivated people. However, what's very interesting, though, is that the United States is conceivably the only nation in the world where we're the most generous in providing tissue as donations. So actually, in the United States, there isn't a huge shortage. It's sort of in equilibrium, and in fact, we are sort of a net exporter of a small amount of corneas. So there isn't a huge amount of competition from this country, and I'm also happy to report that when you really think about biotechnology and bioengineering, U.S. is really still one of the top competitors on a global scale. So yes, we do have competition around the world. However, we believe that cellular bioengineering really is the dominant force in this area, and we are the leader on a global scale right now.
Thanks for tuning in. Stay tuned for more on Greater Good Radio.